Hello everyone, welcome back to Major Hi-Fi. I'm Luke. Today we're going to be looking at a new pair of headphones from Beyerdynamic. These are the DT900 Pro X. They came out in tandem with the DT700 Pro X, which we will also be reviewing. But right now we're just going to focus on this one. The 900 Pro X is a circumaural open back headphone, and there is a difference between the Pro and the Pro X series, which we will get to soon. But right now, let's just go on ahead and unbox this and take a look at it. All right, so not much in the box. We get a pair of headphones, pretty expected. And then we also get this carrying case. It's sort of a standard just drawstring carrying bag, and we also get two cables. They're both mini XLR cables with a 3.5mm termination and a 1/4 inch adapter, but one of them is 5.9 feet and the other one is 9.8 feet, so two different lengths. And that is everything that comes in the box, so let's take a look at these headphones. These run for $299 and they're meant to be a studio headphone aimed at producers, composers, things like that. The 900 Pro X looks a lot like numerous other models I'm sure you've seen from Beyerdynamic. They do not go for a ton of variation looks-wise. These look, a lot like the 1990 Pro, something like that. So you've got a pretty sturdy build as is standard with Beyerdynamic. We've got a nice plush headband here. It's actually got quite a bit of kind of extra padding here, much more than you see on a normal kind of leather headband or whatever pleather is going on here. Then we have these sort of signature velour Beyerdynamic ear pads. They're very fuzzy. They kind of have a blanket-like texture to them, and they make these quite inviting to put on. They do feel as comfortable as they look. These are also, of course, expandable pretty far actually. And we've got a nice sort of grill on the back here with the open back design, but there's not a whole lot to say about these. They're definitely not fatiguing at all to wear. They are like some of the most comfortable headphones you can really buy, with these really luxurious, huge ear pads and all the material used. I would definitely put these high in the comfort section, but they definitely are function over fashion. They're not super stylish looking. By no means are they obscene or like ugly, but they just kind of look like, a pair of headphones. But that's kind of what you're going for when you're looking for a pair of headphones to make music on and stuff like that. No one's probably going to be looking at you anyways. So looks wise, there's not a lot to say. So like I said, these are an open back circumaural headphone, and they are part of the Pro X series, as opposed to the Pro series. So what is different? The Pro X series features the Stellar 45 sound transducer, which was developed and produced in Germany. This uses a 3-layer speaker diaphragm that integrates a dampening layer, which is supposed to help the Pro X perform consistently across different devices. But most importantly, with this new build, the Pro X series is supposed to be much less amp dependent as the Pro series was. So you're not supposed to really need an amp to get proper leveling out of these, and I can attest that you do not. They have a frequency response of 5 Hz to 40 kHz and an impedance of 48 ohms. All right, so why don't we go ahead and talk about how these sound. All right, so for the sound stage, these felt about standard for an open back pair of Beyerdynamics. I wasn't blown away, but that's not a bad thing. They just kind of met the standard. They were probably a little bit wider than the past models, as you'd expect, a little bit of an upgrade, but nothing like totally unheard of, kind of a typical open back sound. The center channel is definitely deprioritized a bit, and the sides are much more pronounced. So basically just the outer edges of the stereo spectrum receive a lot more weight than the inside of it to create a much wider kind of surround sound, immersive feel. These do a good job of that. They're precise, separated, kind of like meet, once again, the Beyerdynamic standard, which for me, at least, I see that as a high standard. They have, a pretty big, loyal audience in the studio production world, stuff like that. But let's go on ahead and get into the tuning. So I will start off by saying that I don't know if these are supposed to be a follow-up to like the DT990 Pro or the 1990 Pro. They're kind of in the middle price-wise. I'm aware they're supposed to be louder than the Pro series, but I don't really know if they're supposed to be related like directly tuning-wise. Of course, the name kind of suggests some relation. I did find them to sound a bit similar to the DT990 Pro, not identical, but definitely a fair amount of similarities. These have a tight, pretty impactful low end, definitely a lot of accuracy going on down there as you would expect with a studio headphone. They do a good job of picking up nuance of sort of different percussive timbres. I wouldn't have minded some more sub presence. I am aware that Too much of that is definitely an easy way to basically ruin any studio or reference headphone because you don't want an unrealistic amount of sub-presence. But to me, I felt like having the ability to hear those lower frequencies a little bit more clearly would help me personally when producing. That's not to say that it was devoid of the sort of basement area. I just felt like maybe a few more drops of that wouldn't have hurt. For me, the low end on these just felt like unbiased, easy to work with, straightforward. You know, it definitely has a fair amount of accuracy. Is it sort of like upsettingly accurate to the point that it's super clinical sounding? Not quite. Whether or not you think it should be is up to you. But for me, I heard a fair amount of tightness and control, like a pretty contained low end, but still retains a fair amount of impact and sort of power to it. For the mid-range, these have a very clean colored mid-range. It has that kind of signature Beyerdynamic sound, which on one hand is, you know, expected. Their headphones to me have sort of a signature sound to them, maybe more so than other brands. If you're maybe thinking I don't want a colored headphone for my production work, I totally get that. I will say it's not intensely colored. I just think there is noticeable saturation. And if there is any kind of biases they have, they're very easy to kind of become attuned to. There's not a ton of like confusing reformatting going on with these. This just does have that Beyerdynamic feel to it that I feel like is communicated most in the mid-range. So they're pretty crisp. There's a little bit of sharpness to them, you know, a fair amount more high mid than low mid maybe, though overall a more neutral kind of tuning in this area, once again unsurprisingly, and the saturation that's added does kind of round off any edges that might be a little bit too crisp. And I also appreciate that the mid-range on these brings out kind of some, you know, unique details from instrument and vocal presence. It adds a nice element of excitement to the listen and just engagement. You know, I know sometimes reference headphones are supposed to sound very dead and kind of like unenthusiastic, and maybe these could use more of that at times, but to me, I don't think it was a flaw. It just seems like they kind of, once again, have their individual quirks and whatnot, and the mid-range was definitely a very pleasant listen. All right, so the high end on these is quite bright. It does stay right below that threshold of like super shiny. That's because it kind of doesn't take too much advantage of the super high frequencies, that 8 kilohertz plus range. It focuses more of the boost on the 4 to 8 kilohertz range, which to me makes for a bit more of a kind of thicker sounding high end, less so that like really tiny, thin, super high layer sitting atop the rest of the mix. Once again, this makes sense. If you have a reference headphone, you don't really want that like glimmering, super glossy, cleaned up high end because that is not realistic. That's what you want a more sort of modulated headphone to do for your mix once it's already been accurately portrayed on a different system. There were times where I felt like I would have maybe wanted a bit more high end in the super highs to give them a little bit less of a metallic sound, but once again, I understand the interest here is accuracy. I think I sometimes get stuck in the kind of casual listening mindset because most of the headphones I've reviewed recently have all been casual listening type of headphones, so I was like, okay, right, they're not supposed to sound like beautiful in every single aspect, or at least the aspects I want them to. I do feel like it maybe could have used a little bit of extra grit in the high end. Like I said, it's not excessively cleaned up, but it is still a fairly, you know, pure sound to it, which once again isn't against the rules or anything in reference headphones, but I wouldn't have minded maybe even a little bit more kind of rough around the edges in the high end, just to present maybe more of a kind of harsh reality of the composition of the track you're working with. All right, so overall, these do feel sonically similar to, you know, like other Beyerdynamic models I've heard, like the 990 Pro and stuff like that, but they do have their own distinct sound. I do see the kind of value, the added flair brought by this new Stellar 45 transducer. These do feel like a worthy upgrade, and they are definitely a fair amount louder than the Pro series. I did not need an amp with these. Would an amp have hurt? No, it wouldn't be a bad thing to use these with an amp, but it's not essential. If you want to just plug and play with these, you totally can. These just felt to have an overall tighter, cleaner handling than kind of some of the past models I've seen in the sort of $300 range from Beyerdynamic. Like, I can see that they're sort of slowly kind of amping things up, no pun intended, just kind of honing their craft over time, as any good company should. And for the price point, $299, are they like super cheap? No, but they're fairly accessible to a pretty wide range of producers, performers, engineers, all that stuff. So I do appreciate that they're not exorbitantly expensive. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the DT900 Pro X. I'm excited to see the reputation that these gain. They have pretty big shoes to fill with the past models from Beyerdynamic. So we'll see what other people think once you guys get your hands on them. These are available for pre-order, I believe. I will link below with a discount code and stuff like that. I will also link below my written article on these if you'd like to read that and get a written version of everything I just said, basically. I'll also link to Major Hi-Fi's headphone ranking tool, where these will both be added alongside basically every other headphone if you want to compare these to whatever model from Beyerdynamic or any company out there and figure out if they're right for you. I will also of course link to my video on the DT700 Pro X, where I will also do some comparison between the two of these. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about these I didn't answer, all that stuff, or ideas for videos you'd like to see. I'll try my best to fulfill which requests I can. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with some more videos and reviews. And until next time, happy listening.